under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again. I believe that we will win. Through the sweat and the fire within, we rise up when the skies grow dim. I believe that we will win. Mud on our boots, steel in our veins. Feel the heartbeat driving through the pain. Feel the battle under shining lights. Every tackle about this fight. I believe that we will win. Push through the noise, drown out the din. No giving up, we dig right in. I believe that we will win. Out on the edge where the brave won't break. With every fall, we've got hearts that ache. But we're not done, we're just starting the run. This is the song to the iron in the sun. Shouts from the stands echo.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And welcome to your favorite, biggest little soccer podcast on the internet at Stateside Footy yet again for another episode. And God damn it, I feel great because joining me tonight is a regular fixture on the podcast from Prost International. It's my buddy Jeff Lageson. Jeff, good evening. How are you?
You know, I'm ready to put on my let's get ready for the World Cup supporters unreasonable angst hat and see what happens.
I hear you. Like I'm in that like weird cycle of trying to be a happy clapper, yet I'm kind of a curmudgeon type of U.S. men's national team type of fan because on the flip side, I want to be like hopeful, but on the downside, like I kind of understand exactly how this shit's going to play out. But that being said, the roster got released, and from that point, I was optimistic. But before we get into it, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons because obviously that's just the thing to do with the podcast like this, man. Just like and subscribe, man. All right. So as I mentioned before, the roster gets released. We are now on the international FIFA break. The interesting thing is that obviously we knew that there was not going to be any experimentation with this roster. We got the names that I think most U.S. men's national team fans wanted to see, names that we probably expect to be at World Cup 2026, although there were some interesting names, especially from Major League Soccer. And the question I had coming into this was whether or not certain teams were going to release certain players, considering, playoff seeding, not necessarily whether they're going to make the playoffs or not, but definitely seeding, because that is definitely going to have some impact on first round matchups. Obviously, in this window, Seattle versus Real Salt Lake. So you're wondering whether Seattle was going to release Christian Roldan, whether Real Salt Lake was going to release Diego Luna. Sure enough, MLS teams acquiesce to the national team, and Pochettino gets some of his guys. And obviously, the goalkeeper situation is what it is. Both of our two best goalkeepers are in Major League Soccer. NYCFC said, it's okay, man. You guys can have Matt Freese. And of course, New England Revolution said, you know what? You can go ahead and take Matt Turner. We don't care. We're out of the playoffs, right? So, it was interesting. It was kind of an interesting situation when I was kind of looking at it, right? Because I was wondering, how that was going to play out. Were you kind of surprised? Some of these MLS teams acquiesced a little bit?
Not since we're so close to the tournament now. I think if this was in the spring, no, we're really only a few windows total between now and the team going. And I have a feeling that the behind the scenes conversations were very much, this has to happen. Maybe don't schedule games during international windows. That's a self-inflicted wound on MLS's part.
Right.
FIFA posts these windows a couple years in advance. They knew not to schedule. Right. They have. That's on them. I think that is definitely a timetable issue right now more than almost anything else, because think of the pressures that clubs in Europe put on non-EU players when it comes to being released to travel around the world for non-competitive matches. And these are officially friendlies, but because it's the host nation, they don't get qualifiers. So the Pulisic and those guys are going to be getting some heat from their European clubs even for coming over for stuff like this, let alone a league that doesn't bother to avoid scheduling when they shouldn't. And so I'm less surprised than I would have been if it was a different time, but it is sometimes surprising. If Seattle needed it, maybe you don't see Roldan go, but Christian's right on that edge of the roster, and he needs to be here if he wants to have a chance. So, I
also think the reason for his inclusion was based off his performances in the last window. Mauricio Pochettino definitely rewards guys that step in and have that leadership quality. Make sure their play isn't necessarily a liability. And I certainly think Christian was going to be putting himself in a position to kind of get an automatic call back in this window.
Yeah, Roldan and Ream are your veteran guys who maybe aren't going to be your starting 11 guys, but you've got to have at the end of the roster in a 6-week 23, 24 player roster that understand being there. You look around the world, every World Cup cycle, there's one or two players that suddenly find themselves back in national league pictures. They're out of it for a couple of years because coaches suddenly look at the end of their roster and need guys that they can trust can handle being that guy. And so Christian being able to play into it. I mean, the U.S. Soccer website prominently displayed Ream and Roldan bring leadership like this. If there wasn't a hint that they have a chance to make it, then I don't know what is. And so really, and Christian's played well this year. I mean, he's been such a big part of the Sounders' really good year from that standpoint. But yeah, this is definitely a little bit of a different vibe to it, because we were talking about this at the end of the last time I was on last month, and my complaint was I didn't know who the team was for sure. I guessed, and then the roster drops and it's like you were saying, I think I know who the roster is, which should be. And we're seeing a lot of those things that we had hoped to see, and we're getting some answers that we needed to get as supporters.
And the interesting thing about it was that I never bought into this MLS, this MLS quota. And what was interesting about it, I was saying about a month prior to this big internet groundswell of well, he's just MLS quoting these type of things. And it's like, no. He had 18 months to get a team ready for the World Cup, right? Generally speaking, if he had a full 4-year cycle, the things that he was doing through essentially March through September, and essentially looking through his player pool, that would have happened in his first 2 years had he had a full year cycle. He had 18 months to try to not only just, I guess you could say, placate the top 15 teams, the top 15 players on the roster that he knows is going to be there. I think you hit it right on the head. It's like, listen, man, we have a 26-man roster, and I got to find the 26 best players, but more importantly, the 26 best players that I can actually trust in the situation. I think he saw in October of last year, November of last year, in March of this year, where he had a bulk of the European-based players. I think he got a very good look at the guys that he had just assumed were probably going to participate, but also looked at guys and wondered whether or not he was going to be able to trust them. And there's a reason why certain guys are just probably not going to be a part of the equation, whether it's injury or whether it's form. And what's funny, people can't seem to understand why Joe Scally's not being called in. It's like, well, I'll tell you what, man. There's a thing called first impressions, and when you make a first impression, it lasts forever, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And there's, and it just is what it is, right? Certain people fit a certain mold, fit a certain style of how he wants to play, regardless of whether fans think that they should be there. There's a reason why certain players get called in. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they play to a certain strength that fits Mauricio Pochettino, and others just don't.
Well, and a lot of what he's been doing March to September this year should have been done in 2023, and instead we had BJ Callahan and a couple of guys, Hudson were interim coaches, and they went through the whole Berhalter fiasco, and so that whole period of time from a infrastructure of developing a team was wasted. And we started wondering that out loud with Poached over the last several months. But if this window and the window in November are these rosters, then and the lineups come out and don't look experimental, then now the question, who's the team we have a sense of, and that's a very different place to be than I felt this summer.
And the interesting thing is, like, when this roster got released, it was more about the players that weren't in camp instead of the players that were in camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Eunice Musas of the world, the Gio Reynas of the world, even maybe the Joe Scallies of the world. The interesting thing is like, I always looked at them. Yes, they were a big part of the last cycle. But that being said, it's like, due to injury, due to form, due to club moves, their circumstances definitely changed. And now the way I look at it is, these guys are bubble guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're 100% out. I just think that maybe Joe Scally's not a good example, because he's actually playing well for Borussia Mönchengladbach. But Gio Reyna and Yuna Musa specifically, I will never say that they're going to be out. The biggest issue with those two guys right now is the fact that they're just not playing. In the case of Yunus Musa, he's playing very little. He's getting like anywhere between 6 to 16 minutes with Atalanta, deciding to make the move from AC Milan, which I think was the right one in the end, because he's sticking to his best position. And Gio Reyna, I think for Gio specifically, it's like, I think he's got to show some maturity, right? I think a lot of the rumors that plagued him at Borussia Dortmund were true. And I think now that he's made the move, now, like, you wonder whether or not he's going to be coachable, whether or not he can actually, I guess you could say, assimilate into a locker room without having any of the baggage follow him, whether or not he can be a good teammate. Like, there's a lot of things surrounding Gio outside of just form and injury is the reason why he's essentially on the bubble.
Yeah, and a World Cup team is unique in that they're together for a longer stretch, and they're very much a brief club team.
Yep.
Right. They have, very often they travel. This is a home nation thing, so that it's going to be a little different, but they're suddenly a team for a while and not just for a window. And you need to see those locker rooms meshing, and you need to see those teams developing, because the good World Cup teams maybe have a little bit of a struggle bus first game, Argentina. And then they slowly develop, and the pieces come together. They get through the group. Maybe they slog along, but they progress, right? And this team has the sort of players who've played together enough that if they can get to that point, and players like Christian can be the players we need them to be, we can have that sort of experience happen. But the bubble guys right now, there isn't time for bubble guys. We need to know who the 18 main core guys are, and who are your emergency reserves. Because anybody who's not in the 18 functionally on a match day is your emergency reserve. You're not there to play. You're there to be a piece, and being diverse in your skill set or position spot, or depth in an essential position, or clearly mature enough and experienced with the coach to be able to be placed in a position where you're not going to play that much, and they can trust that you're not going to be a locker room cancer, is a factor in who gets picked, not just form.
Oh, without a doubt. And it's unfortunate, because Gio's got baggage, right? 2022, and the whole drama surrounding whether or not he was going to be sent home from Qatar. Some of that has lasting impressions, right? And you're wondering whether or not he's moved past that. But let's get into the roster itself real quick before we get into the opponents. When you're looking at position groups, was there a position group in your mind when you're looking at it like, damn, we're playing Ecuador, we're playing Australia, we're playing Paraguay, we're playing Uruguay in the next 4? Specifically with these 2 matches, are you looking at a specific group thinking to yourself, yeah, I don't think we have enough at that position?
Who's our goalie?
Matt Freese.
Right. And we need to see that person be assertive and clearly the leader in that spot. And that player has to completely fend off everybody else in the group of players in camp. He has to stamp his ownership of that spot in these next 2 cycles. We've also been spoiled for decades of of Friedel, Keller, Howard,
Yeah.
Established
Premier League.
EPL, Premier
Yep.
League, like, and not just guys who get there briefly. These guys were entrenched and had careers there, and they
Correct.
owned the penalty area. Like
Right.
they were the guy. And what we have are some solid goalkeepers, but nobody who's just grabbed hold of the position and said nobody is taking this from me for the next 4 years.
The interesting thing though is, like, don't you think Matt Freese has already been given that stamp a little bit though, because he was clear cut number one. He was clear cut number one at Gold Cup. He was clear cut number one in September. He's clear cut one now, and coincidentally, those two windows, Matt Turner wasn't really around.
If he's starting with the Australia Ecuador games, then Poach has decided that. And that will be our signal. If other guys are still getting looks, no, he has to show us that he's the guy in these camps. You can't rotate goalkeepers in the same way in these matches. Correct. And have anybody establish the position. He's got to be the guy. If he's the guy, then we know. But Turner's got the history, and Freese just doesn't have the matches yet. I think Freese has 9 caps.
Right.
So if he gets 4 caps, or even 3 caps of these 4 matches, then I think we're seeing the pecking order. But he also has to grab hold of it and show that it's his. If Poach is sold on him, which I think that's what you were saying, then that's great. And we'll go from there and move forward with that. But I don't know for certain that we're there. We'll see it in these 2 windows. We're going to have so many answers, correct, over these 4 matches and 2 windows in just the next 6 weeks, that when we go into December,
I think we're going to find out right after Ecuador.
Yeah.
Right. Ecuador is such a good team, and we're going to find out real quick. The interesting thing is, believe it or not, for me, my position group that I felt was lacking a little bit wasn't striker, and it wasn't goalkeeper. Believe it or not, two positions where it feels like there's not really a clear cut number one yet. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was at the wing back fullback position. Okay. Especially if if we're playing in a back 3, which I would hope. He continues that trend with the back 3 playing with 2 wing backs. It's the fact that Ante Robinson's coming in without necessarily a lot of starts over the course of the last 5 weeks, still battling a knee injury. This last weekend, I believe Marco Silva kept him out of the Premier League. Maybe it was in tandem with the U.S. men's national team, knowing that he was going to get called in. But the fact that if he can't go, we're still relying on a guy like Max Arfsten, and it's no disrespect to Max Arfsten, who for me in my mind is more of a winger than a wing back. Me personally, a complete defensive liability. And on the right side, without Serginho Dest and without Joe Scally, we're still relying on a guy like Alex Freeman. And again, I like Alex Freeman. I just don't think he's ready for the responsibility of what it takes to compete in these matches, let alone compete in a World Cup. Me personally, I prefer to take the experience over the youth, and especially in a position like this where we know for a fact there's going to be matches where we're going to be holding on for dear life, either protecting a 1-goal lead or trying to protect a draw. And you're kind of, we talk about trust, right? And for me, I like to take the veteran experience more than the upstart youth in these type of situations, right? Which is why I kind of wanted John Tolkien backing up Jedi Robinson, the left wing back from Holstein Kiel, and at least Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach. And again, it's no disrespect. I just think we're light at wing back, and we're essentially relying on 2 MLS guys that are still in their developmental curve. And now you were asking them to compete in the Gold Cup. Okay, that's fine. It's the Gold Cup because you're not really playing CONCACAF heavies until you get to Mexico. And now you're getting Ecuador. You're going to get Australia. You're going to get Paraguay, and you're going to get Uruguay. And these are 4 teams that are going to be at the World Cup. 3 of them have a good shot at advancing past the group stage, but all of them have winning streaks that have extended from 2024 on. Right? These teams are actually in very good form right now. And for me, the wing back core right now, I'm just like, shit, man. Especially with Ecuador, where you're facing very speedy wingers that have pace and physicality. You're just wondering whether or not the wing backs are going to be a liability.
Well, and we'll find out, because you can't play that particular 3-2 structure without the players who are able to track back and defend. And so if those guys aren't doing it, then he's going to have to abandon that structure, or they're just going to be the weakest link. And then we have real problems. And so you could make the case that maybe Anthony's in because it's a chance just to get him into the system and make sure that he's here with it and doesn't necessarily play a lot. But I want to see who the 11 are on the field in this match in 3 days. And I want to see what that formation is, and I want to see that those wingback. If we are getting the MLS wingback starting in that, then we're going to definitely see Ecuador throw stuff down the wings, and we will see how they handle that and get those answers. But that is a big yellow flag, not necessarily red flag, but yellow flag.
It's a caution flag.
It's a caution. It's a caution. Yeah, because it is a weak link. Soccer is a weak link sport sometimes, where it's like if they can exploit a thing over and over again, suddenly get 7 times down the left flank and a half, you're going to have a real problem defending those goal opportunities over time. And so if they do have a weak link on the outside backs, he's going to have to transition away from it in the middle of doing something when he doesn't want to.
That's a great point. I think the biggest issue when it comes to formation, I think the reason why they're going to probably run with that essentially a back 5 is because, if you remember in Japan, they were playing with 2 6s, right? They had a stay-at-home 6, and Christian Roldan playing that role was allowing Tyler Adams to essentially be Tyler Adams. This time there's no Tyler Adams. He's out because his wife is giving birth to the second kids. Congratulations, by the way, on that, Tyler.
That's a valid excuse.
That's a valid excuse, right? So congratulations on their family for their second kid. But this time it's Tanner Tessman, Aiden Morris, Christian Roldan, and James Sands from St. Pauli. I actually think all 4 of these are valid call-ins, especially Tanner Tessman and Aiden Morris, who are essentially been two of the best 6s in Europe right now. And the thing that I like about it is because no matter what combination you want to play, if you're going to play with 2 6s, right? I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because the way that formation works is essentially you're going to have one that's going to stay at home. And if there is an overload to one side, whether they're trying to play a ball down the right wing, you're going to have that other one. You're going to have that other 6 being able to put fires, stepping into space. So essentially it helps out, the wing back position on either side.
Yeah,
right?
And Tessman and Roldan together would be an interesting pairing. In that way. Tessman, I think we're starting to see a real star is born in that spot, playing with Leon. We're gonna see now a player like him become really important, because what he does in that role, what Christian does in that role, allows your center backs to stay home. It allows your outside backs to overlap. It allows your midfield to creep up and press and not have to track back as far. It's the role that Christian does for the Sounders, which allows Rusnak to drift up, and set up things like that. Jesus has benefited from that too. And you could really see the midfield benefit from a solid play right in front of that middle 3. And I think that's a style of play Ploch likes to play, like you're talking about, and they've had success with it. So we'll see. Yeah, the outside back definitely could be a little stronger. We'll see what happens when a couple of guys come back, like you said, from paternity leave and stuff like that.
Sure, but it's also, but even in the buildup or the counter, the interesting thing about those 2 6s was the Liga play improved exponentially better in that Japan game than anything that we saw prior to that, right? And I think you might be onto something, whether it's Aiden Morris or Tanner Tessman, Christian Roldan, whether it's Aiden Morris, James Sands, whatever the case may be. It's like I feel like that position group is exponentially strong. The other interesting thing that I was kind of curious about was how they're going to deploy Tim Weah. in this formation. So if it is a 3-4-2-1, essentially with 2 6s and 2 10s playing underneath a central striker, and
Right.
essentially Christian Pulisic is essentially running as I guess you could say a hybrid 10 false 9 type of player,
Correct.
where he's essentially just being able to have a free roam to pretty much do whatever he wants, right? So
They get in there in between their midfield and defense, and
correct,
be
right?
be a menace.
The last time we saw this, it was Alex and Dejas off of the right, but now Malik Tillman is in camp, which is awesome, and I'm happy to see Malik Tillman in camp.
That was a
because
welcome roster spot.
the idea of Malik Tillman playing next to Christian Pulisic is kind of enticing. But that being said, so is Timmy Weah.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, Timmy Weah's best position's on the right. But if we're not playing with an attacking 3 up top, he also has the ability to play at the right back position too, because that's actually one of the central positions he plays for Olympique Marseille. He played it again this last weekend. I think he had 82 minutes at the right back position, actually played incredibly well. And so now the question is whether or not, if you're trying to get your best players on the pitch, whether or not that would actually be a liability as Timmy Weah at the right wing back spot.
I don't know necessarily that he was. If you're pressing up and keeping possession and holding a team up, then your wingbacks don't have to get back as often and as fast and be as strong as defenders in the first place, because they really become wingers. We don't necessarily also want to trust the way players are labeled in press releases on a roster. It's how Poch is going to use them, right? So maybe Weah's come in to play that role. We've seen players make those sorts of transitional moves in the past, and maybe that's what we'll get. That would be an interesting thing, just to sort of put a little asterisk next to look at, to see how they're listed, how they're labeled on a, here's the lineup sheet, and you look at it and go, oh, he's listed as and then you see him and he's out on the right wing and behind midfield, and you're like, oh, he's really actually playing that position. You don't always, sometimes there's a little gamesmanship in the way players get labeled. And so maybe
that's true.
That would be an interesting if that was to do it, because we may still see Pepe back, which would be a target striker in the one spot down the road, and that would set Weah up for getting your best 10 field players on the field somehow.
Right. And that was my point, right? Is this a type of game against Ecuador where you got to put your 10 best players, your outfield players, on the pitch regardless of position?
I think so. I think we're at a point where they almost have to consider these to be these matches have to be like a group phase of the World Cup. They're going to be judged that way. The two this coming up, the 2 in November, are very close proximity to each other. Players are in early season form in Europe. Players are end of season form in MLS. Let's see how they do and keep track of the points of these 3 matches, and then your first elimination round game being Uruguay down the road. So can you beat these 3? Can you get the points against these 3 opponents that are going to be group phase difficult outs? 3 tough points to get from all of these teams in a World Cup. You're playing in the U.S. Well, you're going to be playing in the U.S. anyway, so that is representative of the type of situation you're going to face. You're not having to. So you're getting a real representation of the conditions of which you're going to be playing in. You're playing teams that are making the World Cup in stadiums in the U.S. with U.S. support and players coming in and a chance to do what you want. Let's see how it looks.
I would agree with it. I would agree with that sentiment as well too, and also to mention the fact there's probably going to be a strong Ecuadorian contingent in that crowd as well too. So there's probably going to be some pressure in that match as well too.
Those are exciting crowds. Those are fun.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. You mentioned Ricardo Pepi, and of course Ricardo's out with the leg strain. When you look at the striker group, were you pleased with the striker group?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that we don't see Josh Sargent anymore, and that probably means he's not the bubble player anymore that we thought, with Haji Wright coming back in and Pepi coming in. He's a few more notches down that list than we thought. Looking at the depth chart on that, in the forwards, Bolgan, yeah, there's a solid group there. I like Zendejas. I like Haji. Yeah, these guys all are capable of scoring 2 or 3 goals in a 4 or 5 match stretch from the striker position and giving you a chance to win some matches and get some points. So those guys all fit in. I don't know that anybody beyond Christian and them are really head and shoulders ahead of each other in Poach's mind. But who gets the start and what the rotation is will be interesting to see, and who partners well with Pulisic or who makes for a good target. Because if you're overlapping your wing backs, you've got to be good as a target runner coming in and being the guy that can get to the near post or whatever it is and do that. So
Right.
I'm going to be curious to see where that goes, because if they're going to be playing those wing backs, then the idea is to get the ball down the flank and then bring it in. And then you've got to have the guys like Pulisic who are good at that, trailing in, coming in across the penalty spot and being a deeper target in the guys forward. I'd like to see, from my standpoint at this point in time, when I look at it, I really like what I see from a Haji Wright and Zendejas. So it'll be interesting to see if those are the guys who Poach does, but you can rotate those guys a little bit more and get kind of similar outcomes, I think.
Yeah, the interesting thing though is I would probably assume that Balogun's probably going to take the first game against Ecuador. I would probably assume that if you're running your 10 best out there, Balogun's going to be there. The interesting thing about Haji Wright is the fact that he also is a left winger if you're going to play 3 across the top, right? If you wanted to start, Christian at the 10, okay, whatever. If you're going to go back to that 4-2-3-1 and you wanted to, use a traditional winger, Haji has the experience because he played that forever at Coventry. But this year, Frank Lampard has moved him up as a target 9. And he's been absolutely awesome. As a matter of fact, I think he scored this last week and overtook Josh as the leading scorer in the championship. And so, rightfully, that dude's in form. The other guy that's kind of an interesting pick was Patrick Agyemang, obviously the darling of Camp Cupcake and the I guess you could say the darling of the Gold Cup next to Malik Tillman. He was out with the groin issue for the first month and a half of the season. Came back, got his minutes. Scored last week for Derby County, and as soon as I heard that Pepe was out, I just assumed Agyemang was going to get called in. He sure enough gets called in, and so the intrigue is not game 1, because I think we both agree that Balo's probably going to be playing up top in game 1. It's game 2 against Australia, and whether or not Poch kind of takes his foot off the gas against a team like Australia, just assuming that even if we played like a hybrid 11 of European-based players and MLS-based players, that might be enough, and then we might see Patrick Agyemang up top and up in that second one, right? That to me is the intriguing match of the two, is whether or not he takes the foot off the gas against Australia.
I hope he doesn't. I would really like to see him worry less about who we're playing and more about what he wants to do with what he has.
Right.
Do what you do and make them adjust. If you start doing that too much, then you're not getting as much value out of this window as you could. So, like you said, keep an eye on it. That's an intrigue. I hope he doesn't. I hope he just brings them out and puts his team out and lets them play a couple games together, and basically uses that as the carrot to the guys down the roster. This is my 14-15. Rest of you show me that you should break in, and I'd like to see a similar lineup in both matches.
I would agree. Yeah, for sure. And that is, I guess that's my worry, because we've seen windows where the first match was taken seriously and either players left after the first match and they devalued the second match. But that being said, you mentioned earlier, like, this should be taken as World Cup group stage games. I was gonna say something similar, like, qualification games, qualifying games, right? Like the same intensity, the same drive, the same attention to detail. But that being said, it's like, on one hand, I can understand if they do it, especially if he gets it right. But that being said, one of the things that this team cannot afford right now is an excuse to do something like that, because I don't think they can afford to drop both of these games.
I don't think they can afford to take a single game as less important than any other right now.
Right.
If they are, that is an institutional problem within his coaching staff and the player
Right.
pool. They have what, 6 games, 8 games total
Six
before.
games, I think. 6.
Yeah, they don't have a game they can take off. And if they are, then they aren't getting the maximum out of this, and they need to milk every ounce of data and information and credibility
Correct.
that they
That's a good word.
can out of these things. Yeah, you mentioned, the qualifiers. The challenge of being a host nation is you lose the intensity of qualification,
Right.
which was why the Copa was perceived to be so big, why Gold Cup and
Sure.
Nations League have had a little bit of a higher spotlight. Not having the hexagonal.
Yeah, for sure.
The hexagonal was the best agony as a fan we had for what, 20, 25 years. And that's the whole Dos Cero came from. That's where going on the road and winning in San Pedro Sula and grabbing points, those were intense.
Yep.
You were definitely vetted, because you were shown out if you didn't show up, and you had to really put up in those environs. And one of the toughest things about CONCACAF wasn't necessarily that it was deep, is that playing those 5 road matches in Central America, 1 Caribbean game, Mexico City, 3 Central American games, those 5 games were what bloodied a team before the World Cup. Those matches were so important, because they gave you something to step back and look at. Playing in San Jose, playing in San Pedro Sula, playing in maybe even like San Salvador. Those matches were just brutal. Even if the opponents maybe don't get quite the respect, those environs and stuff were you're
Right.
unable to duplicate. There's no substitute for those matches,
Right.
those environments, and that it's not there right now. And that not being there definitely is a reminder of how toughened they are as a group. As individuals, we all know they're professionals. That's not the issue. But as a collective, how do they respond to each other, and things do they get from doing that? And I want to see them suffer a little. I want to see them, as Emma had the women's team do, suffer a little bit. I would like to see them play on a little bit of a short rest, and then play another good team with the majority of the same guys, to see how they respond to that. Their clubs won't like it. Their clubs won't like it. But that is definitely what you need to see from these matches. It can't just be A team and B team. These 11 play one game, these 11 play the other. We're past that. We have to have a little bit of a roster, developing a little bit of a code amongst themselves of playing through some adversity.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that too, because you're absolutely right. For all those people that say that CONCACAF doesn't get you prepared for a World Cup, I'm like, you certainly haven't been paying attention, because historically speaking, it actually has, because of the reverse fixtures where you actually have to travel into Mexico, into Honduras, into Panama, environments where it's absolutely insane, but also it's actually a brutal test, right? Because these teams, a lot of these Central American teams have no problem being physical. A lot of these teams have no problem taking cheap shots on the pitch, especially when the ref isn't looking. And it's like, you talk to any of the former players that had participated in World Cup qualifying prior, and they will tell you that it was the toughness of CONCACAF and the environments around CONCACAF. By the time they got to the World Cup, there was no deer in the headlights moment, because they were actually ready to go, because they actually played in worse environments in CONCACAF, and that was the biggest. And that was the biggest problem about this cycle, was there was no qualifying, there was no carrot, there was no need to play with intensity, because they were already in. They didn't have to worry about it. They feel like they could just show up and turn it on at the end and get themselves ready for a World Cup without having the nuance of qualifying.
And that's a problem right now and it's a problem for Mexico and Canada too. Sure. It's a problem for anybody who hosts, it's a historical problem. The '94 Cup 30 years ago, when we hosted, you had the residency program where they essentially turned the national team into a club team and played 50 just played a weekly match against anybody who could show up to Fullerton, and basically, they played, Iceland 8 times or whatever, all those matches because they just got regular games and regular play. And some of those guys had absurd national team caps because, they'd get like 75 caps in 3 years. And it was just like, because that was their club team, because they didn't really necessarily have, the league hadn't started yet, the league blossomed out of it. And so for a lot of those guys, there was a handful of European players, but most of those guys played, a year and a half of just regular matches. And that was a good approach. It worked.
Sure.
That team definitely found several players to augment the handful of internationals out of it. This team can't be run like a club team anymore. You can't do that. We have right now, as a national team player pool, a greater number of players playing in good leagues with good teams in an MLS that continues to evolve and is better. It isn't England, it isn't the Premier League, but MLS toughens you. It's a physical, demanding league with lots of travel. There's all sorts of things about it that are very good for vetting of players. But we have guys playing. I mean, right now, our captain, our top player, and we talked about this before coming on the air. Right now, Christian is the best player in Serie A, a lot of people are saying. And we need to see those guys have that tournament. But you can't run it like a club anymore.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Let's turn our attention to Ecuador real quick, because I got to be honest with you, this team kind of scares me a little bit. According to the ELO rankings, they are the 9th best team in the world right now, sandwiched between the Netherlands and Croatia. Coincidentally enough, in the next window, we get Uruguay, which is the 11th ranked team in the world, and Paraguay, which is ranked 21st. We are all the way down in the power spot of number 45, sandwiched between Georgia and Algeria. And of course, I pay more attention to the ELO rankings than I do for FIFA, because
the FIFA rankings are definitely different than that. The FIFA rankings have us at 16th, not 45th.
It's like, and I ask everybody, like, have we been playing like the 16th best team in the world right now? Absolutely not, right? So it's the coefficients of how they rank teams are a little bit better. But Ecuador comes into this one with it looks like their top roster. As a matter of fact, Enter Valencia is on this team, and it looks like they have their entire front attacking three and their entire midfield available for this one as well too. I got to be honest with you. These are the type of teams that absolutely freak me out, because not only are they absolutely skilled and rosters full of killers, but they're also incredibly tough. They're not going to be coming into this match afraid of the U.S. whatsoever.
No, a lot of teams come in for friendlies playing in the U.S. because it's an opportunity to get players into a good travel environment, a good trading environment, things like that. Ecuador, Australia, Paraguay, and Uruguay need to use these the same way the U.S. is. Their agenda is they're scouting where they're going to be training. They're scouting what the stadiums and travel situations are going to be like, what it's going to be like on an administrative level dealing with coming into the U.S., all of those things. So this is a dress rehearsal for those teams, and they're bringing their team to do it. They want to show out to their fans. They want to show out to the world. They want to make these games a statement, and that actually helps the U.S. because they're going to get something better than the average friendly out of it. A lot of times you get a friendly and they have half their lineup. These are going to be matches that the other team also has an interest in the outcome, because they're trying to create some excitement back home. All of the same things we're talking about with the United States. Get your supporters ready, show that you're ready for the World Cup. Ecuador needs to do that. They need to show that they can come up here to the U.S. and be successful for their fan base. The same with Paraguay, same with Uruguay, same with Australia has to show that they can travel and come here and establish and give their fans something to cheer about and some momentum going into next spring, the same way the U.S. is. And so getting teams that are good and World Cup teams for these two windows is above average, because most of the times I don't care about friendly results as much. This time I do. I do too. These are a little bit of it. These are friendlies with a capital F, as opposed to lowercase friendlies. These matches mean a little bit more, and we can lean into the outcomes mattering more than just flow of play. I need to see a team that's playing well, but I also need to see a team that's getting results and can play together and see out defend a lead with the last 8 minutes in stoppage time, those sorts of things. We need to see those things coming from these teams over the next. And he can't be doing 8 subs. He's got to play it like a game.
Right.
And
the interesting thing is, one of the things we haven't seen this team grind out a win. That necessarily necessarily played 60 minutes kind of horribly, but was able to turn it on, get an equalizer, and as you say, like grind out the last 8 to 10 minutes and hold out for a result, right? It's one of the things that we just really haven't seen with this team. It's either they win big or they lose big.
Winning a 1-0 game is a collective skill set that a team has to develop as part of its collective DNA, and it is hard to do. And to see out a match, to not just park the bus, but to really truly see out a match, control a game, not just defend frantically, show that you can maintain control and kill off a game. You have a 1-0 lead, the clock becomes your 12th man, and you start working with that. The other team has to start taking risks. Can you punish them for taking those risks and get the second goal? I want to see those sorts of things happening. The 89th minute, the 89th minute, you get a second goal because you send Haji or somebody forward. They break through. Maybe you don't send numbers at that point, but can you then make a team? Can you stretch a team and then punish them on a counter late? Those are sort of the interesting things that the good teams do.
Mm-hmm.
They make 1-0 games, 2-0 games, and then stoppage time just becomes a dance. That sort of thing. I want to see those sorts of little things. Yeah.
Is there a specific player that you point to? Is this like an obvious question as far as grabbing a match by the scruff of the neck and actually leading a team to either a decisive victory or holding on by the skin of their teeth? Is there one player that you point to and if there's any one player that needs to show out, it's
whoever's in the six. Okay. Whoever's in the six. We need to see that player holding and commanding the midfield, taking the pressure off of their defense when they get the ball, redistributing it wide. Whoever's in that six, whether it be Tessman, whether it be Roldan, whether it be the other names we talked about, whoever's in that sixth spot, late in a match, especially if we have a lead, has to show us that they can be a true holding, just presence. They have to do the thankless work that only fans that watch a team play a lot will appreciate, and they have to then set themselves up so that they can get the ball and they can distribute it back out, and they maintain the composure and everybody can rally around them. And I think that holding midfield spot, that six, really has to be an anchor spot for the U.S. to be successful in this tournament.
Ooh, I like it. And I don't disagree. I was going to point to Christian for the obvious reason.
Well, he could be that guy. He could be that guy,
sure.
But it could be Tessman. Whoever's in that spot in the 75th minute forward is we've got to look at and see what they're bringing. And I think right now it's going to be Tessman.
I would agree.
And so who I'm looking at? We need to see Tanner Tessman develop into that guy.
Right. And by the way, the last time we saw Tessman with the national team, it wasn't pretty. It really wasn't pretty. The reason why I said Christian was because, essentially speaking, for the last year and a half, he's been garbage for the national team. Mm-hmm. He's been sensational for Milan, garbage for the national team. And I think this even dates back to the Copa America. And I know he scored against Bolivia in the first game, but for the most part, when they needed a result against Panama, didn't get one. When you needed somebody to step up and actually lead against Uruguay, it didn't happen. And essentially every tournament and every friendly window since Copa America 2024, he's either taken the national team for granted, acted like he would rather be anywhere else but the national team. His result, his form has actually showed. And what's interesting about it, because as soon as he steps back into his club team, he's absolutely awesome again. And now it's time, Jeff. Now it's time, because we are less than 10 months away from the World Cup, right? And now it's like he showed it against Japan a little bit, but now it's like we need definitive performances from the guy who is essentially Captain America.
And here's where we become the alums that are feuding with the current team. Right. These are the guys that this is the same criticism that the retired
True.
players have been having of those guys is exactly what you just said. Taking it for granted, not putting in, not realizing that this is your the pride and there's a lot of room for criticism on that. And my biggest concern with Christian is his response to it. He read the comments and he needed to show up instead, and he didn't. And so Pulisic has an opportunity between now and next summer of establishing himself as one of the true greats of U.S. soccer.
Yeah.
You know, when we think of who our best players have been over the last 30 or 40 years, where we've had consistent World Cups and had some tastes of success, and we look at Landon and we look at Clint and some of these guys, Pulisic is one of those guys that's been long on potential, looked pretty good in 22, but he has a chance at 27 years old, playing so well for Milan, to step in and on the biggest stage, literally New York and LA, you know, the biggest stages there is in the United States at home, of establishing himself as the guy of this era for US soccer. And we can't advance very far in the tournament if he's not.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the interesting thing about it is I'm going to speak some truth real quick. And the difference between the old guard and the new guard at the U.S. men's national team is, back in the day, they needed the national team because a lot of these guys, you know, especially pre-MLS and even in MLS's infancy, they needed the national team for them to be able to showcase themselves, to get themselves out in front of scouts and potentially get their moves to Europe, right? So they absolutely needed the national team.
Yep.
Nowadays, a lot of these players were given opportunities at a very young age to to move over to Europe prior to the 18th birthday. They've already made their money, and quite frankly, they don't need the national team as much as they need their club teams, right? And so there's a reason why it almost felt like they've been taking the national team for granted, because quite honestly, you question whether or not they actually need it. Does playing for your country and wearing the badge actually matter as much as your club badge?
And the
right?
the clubs in Europe do pressure non-EU players pretty hard about the travel and getting away. You see it with some of the South American players, the African players for sure. The U.S. players definitely are going to get that pressure. Well, it's a friendly. Why are you traveling? You don't need it. You're here. We're paying yourself. And the club versus country, and the power of European clubs in the politics of world football is pretty immense. And in this instance, we're dealing with clubs like AC Milan, and we're not talking about
Juve. Yeah.
Right. We're talking about the biggest teams in the biggest leagues. And the pressures on them to perform for the amount of money that they're paying those guys to play for them is real. And no, they don't need it as much. A friendly in March didn't mean anything to Pulisic in the grand scheme of things, but we need these October and November ones to be like qualifiers for him. And if he comes out and plays with that zip in his step, then we're going to be okay. But we can't see anything less than that from him, and expect it to just turn on a dime in June.
I would agree. That's a very good point. All right, so we got a few minutes left, Jeff. And so first and foremost, U.S. versus Ecuador. How do you see this one playing out?
I think that the U.S. would do very well if they can hold a clean sheet, and they would do very well if they can score 2 goals. So a 2-1 win would be a great result for them in that match. However, Ecuador, like you said, is coming in a blazing. I have a feeling that's going to be a very hard-fought draw between two teams that maybe don't take a lot of risks down the way. One team will score first, one team will fight to hold off to equalize. But if it's I don't know that if that scoreline is closer than 1 goal and anybody scores more than 1 or 2 goals, it'll be a surprise. I think teams are going to come out a little bit intense on their tackling, a little more intense on their tracking back. There's going to be a little bit of a chip on the shoulder. There better be a chip on the shoulder on the U.S.'s defensive standpoint.
I would agree, and that's the interesting thing, right? Because I don't see a scenario where the U.S. scores more than 2. I think if they come out with a 2-1 result, I think they should feel fortunate. But that being said, I also feel like they feel fortunate if they walked away with a result like a 1-1 draw. I think that would be the best case scenario because it puts you in a good position against Australia.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about Australia, and a lot of people give Australia shit because they're in the Asian Federation. Not a lot of good teams in Asia outside of South Korea and Japan. People haven't really realized that this team hasn't lost since 2024. I think they lost to Bahrain in May of 2024, but haven't lost since.
And their travel is
insane.
Is insane. And so them having the occasional bad game in travel is a little more understandable than almost anybody else, especially once they moved from Oceania to Asia. They adopted that. That's the game that the U.S. needs to show a couple goal win on. I want to see that be a 2-0 win. And I want to see more than one goal. I want to see more than one goal in that game. I want to see them score a couple goals in that game.
I don't want this. I don't want them to overlook Australia because they're Australia. No. I don't want them taken for granted, right? Because that team is a scrappy little team. And what's funny is like there's certain national teams that I watch and I'm like, oh, they're kind of fun, right? They're kind of fun to watch, and depending on the opponent, they actually have good results, right? But that being said, it's like I would probably assume that Australia's purpose coming to the United States is exactly the same thing as Ecuador. They're not going to take the U.S. for granted. They're not going to be afraid of the U.S., right? But I happen to agree with you, right? Talent-wise, position for position, the U.S. is better. Even with certain MLS players, they're going to be better in that position, right? And I would tend to agree with you that if they can put 3 against Australia, that would be a result that kind of mirrors that.
Yeah, they definitely need to they need to not just get a result in that game. They need to be the clearly better team. Yeah. And we're seeing Ecuador has given more than goal in a year. That's definitely then makes it an important one. I really want to see something like that happen. Scoring some goals on a good Ecuador team, a good CONMEBOL World Cup team is a challenge. Those are what I want to see. I want to see them worry less about who they're playing and do what they want to do and assert themselves against whoever the opponent is. I want the other team to be reacting to them. I want the other teams to be reacting to them.
Right.
You're going to be the host at the World Cup. You're going to be the number one team in Group A. You need to be the team that other teams are adjusting to, not the other way around at this point in time. So what do I want from it? That. What will I accept from that? I want the eyeball test to be good. I want them to look like I want them to look good. I don't want them to look frantic and disinterested or any of those things. I want them to look like a team that's out there to play 90 minutes and do their business. I want to see a team that's taking it seriously like a qualifier. And that is definitely important.
By the way, you brought up a very interesting statement, the eyeball test. When was the last time this team actually passed the eyeball test? Probably World Cup 2022, yeah? Yeah,
well, they looked pretty good in when they had the interim coaches. Like they looked pretty solid in a couple of those matches there. They played Mexico and they beat them like a couple of times in a row in that time period with BJ and stuff.
Right.
And they actually looked all right doing it. But that's right after 2022.
Correct.
Still too.
Correct.
They haven't passed the eyeball test in a while. Yeah,
that's kind of disconcerting. All right.
Well, I mean, coach's record is 10 wins, 7 losses, and a draw. Like they haven't had the results and things in a couple years. So
fair.
Fair. The results do not speak to them passing the eyeball test because of who they've beaten. Anybody they played that's good, they've lost to.
Yeah, and even against CONCACAF heavies, they haven't looked good either. All right, well, before we go, Jeff, is there any last thing you want to touch on?
Just that I think that we talked about this last time I was on the air, and I want to circle back to that is I want to be wrong. I still don't know that we have that. I have a little bit of a better sense of it now than I did a month ago because he did then bring this group forward and the talk is good. Now I don't want to hear talk. I want to see a team that goes out there and looks like a team and not just a collection of interesting players. And that's what I want. I want the team to pass the eyeball test over the next week and a half.
One of the things that the biggest thing that I'm going to circle for this window is I want Poch to finally know what his best 11 is.
Or tell us if he already knew.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Or tell us,
Yeah.
right? Because he's had multiple combinations of 11s and multiple windows, and it to me it always gave the impression that he didn't necessarily know who his best 11. I think he knows like maybe 3 or 4 players who are going to be in the 11, but as far as like the rotation goes, it just seems like he was throwing darts at dartboards there for a while, just trying to see if something is going to stick. So for this window specifically, I want to see his best 11, and I want to see it in multiple games. I don't want to see heavy rotation between games anymore. Nope. Like if your best 11 comes out against Ecuador, that's got to be the same 11 against Australia.
Yeah, and I want to see Christian Pulisic look for the US like he looks for Milan. I want him to look like that.
Well, we used 2 6s. We used 2 6s against Japan.
Yeah,
we did.
Yeah.
Even though Roldan was kind of shading a little high, he was essentially a stay-at-home 6 against Japan. But anyway, that is going to do it for us. I want to thank Colin Reese, who's in the chat. I want to thank Harry Namkoon, who's in the chat. Nate Holloway, my guy Nate Holloway, who's Mr. Rhode Island FC in the USL Championship. I love that dude, right? He's like, that is a strong Rhode Island fan right there. And I'm all for it. I'm all for the USL Championship as
represent your club, man. Represent
that's
your club.
That's exactly right. But before I go, I want to make sure everybody that hits the like and subscribe buttons. Jeff, I want to thank you for taking time out. I know that your schedule is about to be incredibly busy, so I do appreciate the hour that you gave tonight.
Yeah, I am the father of the groom this weekend. So
yeah, the father of the groom, right? So congratulations to your son and his upcoming marriage. Is there anything that is coming out on Prost International from you?
I really, my focus over the next several weeks is the end of my NWSL coverage for the year with the rain, because that's winding down, and that's kind of more what I'm doing. Then I'll probably pick up some Sounder playoff coverage. So that'll be what I'll stagger into over the next probably 8-10 weeks, is the last couple NWSL and then MLS Cup playoffs. So
Excellent. Speaking of the MLS Cup playoff, the live streams will be available here on Stateside Footy as we cover multiple playoff games in the MLS Cup playoffs. Obviously, for the next week and a half, it's going to be the U.S. men's national team. This Saturday at I believe it's 9:00. The U.S. versus Ecuador will be a live stream here, and then of course the following Tuesday, I believe it's Australia. It could be Wednesday. We will have that live stream as well too. So the U.S. men's national team will be covered from all angles here on Stateside Footy. So make sure you tune in. Until then, guys, I want to say thank you. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I hope you guys enjoy your Tuesday evening. Jeff, thank you again.
Take care.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies, tattered flags waving dreams in our